I don't have a father. I have two moms, though, and one of my moms, therefore, was not my biological mom. And as I've come to understand the way that people relate to their fathers, I see some ways in which that mom who was not my biological mom, Laurel, she was in that role in some way for me. And one of the ways is that as a teenager, trying to get her attention and be someone who she would admire and respect, I got really into the thing that she was really into, which was church. She started seminary right about that time. And so me and Laurel had this tradition then every year of going to seminary, going to General Assembly. General Assembly, this national event where Unitarian Universalists from all across the country, and at that point Canada too, would get together for 4 or 5 days, and it was like Unitarian Universalist Disneyland. As a 13, 14-year-old, I was in heaven with my people. I found my people. And I just stayed up all night. We'd do midnight worships just the way we did at the youth conferences. I loved that. And then my favorite part, and it probably still is when General Assembly happens in person, although it's lost some of its glamour for me, is the exhibit hall, where all of those little side conversations about what's going on can happen as people pass by each other around all the booths of the various organizations, and the tchotchkes, right? The Unitarian Universalist swag, the buttons and shirts, and the stoles. I mean, 14-year-old Marcus wandering around the exhibit hall just someday. And I was so into it. I went every year, and then I led worship one year. I got appointed to be the worship leader for the youth worships and at our big General Assembly in Boston, leading worship for 1,500 people. I mean, the deal was done. I couldn't get out at that point. And I began, because I was paying a lot of attention, I was trying to figure out what was going on here, I began to pick up on some of the deeper conversations about what is this Unitarian Universalism thing, and why do people care so much? What is it that's holding us together? This experience of being a community that was unlike any other community that I was a part of, this feeling of being together with thousands of people who I felt I belong with. What was it that was holding us together? And the conversation that I started to pick up on that was a deeper layer was, we're a little anxious about that. We're a little uncertain and anxious about what it is that holds us together. And I think it has its roots all the way back in our formation in the Reformation, when we, as the wing of the Reformation, this far wing of the Reformation that some historians say we are the wing of that Reformation that never stopped reforming, with our pencils and our erasers, revising and revising and revising. It's a beautiful thing. It's why your hymnal says the living tradition right on the cover. It's a beautiful thing, and yet it comes with this anxiety. If we're going to just keep revising and revising and revising, changing potentially the very most core tenets that we hold together, what is it that holds us together? It was only a generation in, not even, when Unitarianism was first proclaimed by William Ellery Channing in that sermon on Unitarian Christianity in the 1820s. It was just a decade or two in that the transcendentalist movement completely threatened our understanding of ourselves as part of the Christian fold. Those folks like Thoreau and Parker and Emerson and Fuller and all these transcendentalists saying, well, maybe there's something even beyond, wider than the Bible as a source of truth. Even with all of our reason that we apply to the Bible, that was the original kind of thrust of Unitarianism, maybe there's something even more. And just another couple of generations later, and the whole thing's being undermined again by humanism. And this idea that maybe we could just throw God out of the picture altogether. So we have this anxiety, this instability, this question, what is it then that holds us together if we're going to continue adapting and evolving and changing as the culture changes around us, as our own hearts and minds evolve? Universalism, that other side of our heritage, was a little more firm in its commitments. It stayed closer to the Christianity that it had inherited, but it came around too to this understanding of a more this-worldly religion. The thinking was that original meaning of universalism as in universal salvation, that we're going to all end up in heaven. That if that's true, those 20th century universalists began to think, well then we better start getting along now. There's no escape from this interdependence. And that focus on a this-worldly religion is part of what brought our traditions together. And when that merger happened in 1961, this anxiety of what holds us together was front and center. What is it going to hold these two traditions? What's going to be strong enough to hold these two strands of American liberal religion under the same roof? And as I understand it, at least one of the moments in that process, all that anxiety got focused in on one word, on an article in the sources, what we now call the sources, when they were talking about the Judeo-Christian heritage. Merger hinged on whether we were going to call it the Judeo-Christian heritage or our Judeo-Christian heritage. Anybody know which one we landed on? Our. We called it our Judeo-Christian heritage, and that's what held that anxiety in that moment. Over and over again, we've come back to these moments of anxiety. We've adapted and changed the core documents of our faith, and we're in another such moment now. That's the point of all of this. This General Assembly this week, there is a revision to Article 2, which is the part of our Unitarian Universalist Association's bylaws, which articulates the purpose and principles of Unitarian Universalism, of our association. And there's a revision that has been through a very long process. We have a lot of guardrails in our tradition, if you haven't noticed this already, about how decisions like this get made, guardrails that keep it democratic. But the anxiety that's focused now, I don't think it has so much to do with actually what's in the language of this revision. There's not a really radical departure. All of the language of the current principles shows up, all the key language, all those phrases that you know some of them, I bet, shows up in this new proposal. But it's become for some a symbol of what I think is a values conflict that's happening across the world. And it's a values conflict between the modernist set of values, and this is a very, very simplified version of some of the work that people have done based on Ken Wilber's ideas about integral theory. But the very simplified version is that the modernist values center around reason. The forms of our democracies and our organizations, the corporation, all come out of this sort of modernist values centered on reason. And what I think is this Article 2 is a symbol of, for some people, is the threat to those modernist values, which is the postmodernist set of values, which center, I think, care in a different sort of way. I'm not going to go into this. This is going to be a topic to talk about for a long time, but the way that postmodernism centers care displaces some of the things that modernism holds most dear. And in that conflict, we find ourselves in the anxiety again of what is it that holds the center. Now, even though I don't think that Article 2 proposal, this revision, that looks likely to pass. Last year, over 80% of the people, delegates at General Assembly, voted to approve it to move forward. So we'll be talking about it for some time, I imagine. But what it does do is two really useful things for us. The first is, can any of you, if I had $100 to offer right now to anyone who could rattle off the 7 principles? Could anyone, anyone who hasn't been on staff of a Unitarian Universalist church, Michelle, Aya, yeah. Right, we have some beautiful words there, but they're not memorable. They're not easy to hold on to. And so what this proposal does, and I'm going to show you a really silly picture in just a second here. But what this proposal does is give us, instead of 7 long principles, 7 values. One-word values that both are easy to remember and answer a troubling question, which is that we talk about our shared values all the time, our Unitarian Universalist values, but we didn't have anywhere where they were actually articulated. And so there's a mnemonic for remembering what these values are, and the mnemonic is jet pig. You're going to see a jet pig here. Unitarian Universalists across the country now are making jet pigs. There's jet pig stuffed animals. There's a couple more. Let's see some. Oh, there's a jet pig. I think AI might be involved in some of these jet pigs. There it is. So let's hold on to that one for a second here. Jet pig, the acronym is justice, equity, transformation, a big word, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. These are the first 6 of these Unitarian Universalist values. And lots more to say about each of them, but jet pig is the name they spell out, and that's going to, I guarantee every single one of you can pull these back up. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. I do think these are our values, and I would highlight one of them in particular that is not present in our current principles as they stand, but is core to our faith, has been present through that whole journey of Reformation after Reformation, revision after revision. It's pluralism. It's a move towards a greater and greater understanding of pluralism, embracing love beyond belief, a wider and wider spectrum of belief. Now, of course, you can see there on the pig's chest, there is a 7th value, and it's the second great thing I think that this proposal for our new Article 2 does for us. It says clearly and without qualification, love is at the center. It's a reclamation of our Universalist heritage, who said, love is and always will be at the center. Our way of talking about it might change. Our way of showing it might change. We might need to use those pencils, erasers over and over, but at its core there is a message we have been given, a truth, and that truth is love is at the center. When John Murray was first preaching that message in the late 1700s in what would become the United States, he said it like this, and it's not how we would articulate it anymore, but it's the same truth. He said, if a human father can forgive his child, then certainly our divine Father can forgive us. What he meant was there is no hell, there is no eternal damnation, because how could anyone imagine doing that to their child? And if we understand, as they did then, God to be this divine Father, how could that happen to anyone? Now, I'm guessing that no one actually probably in this room, maybe a couple of us, would talk about a divine Father in those terms, but that idea of a love that wins out, that is for everyone, no exceptions. This is the heart of the tradition that's been handed down, and it's the gift we have to hold for ourselves and pass on to future generations. We learn this love. We learn how to love. And I've said before, and I still think it's true, I don't know what love is exactly, but we learn it by experiencing it. We grow our capacity to love by being loved. I remember one moment when Henry had been playing with a label maker. We'd just gotten a label maker. And he was labeling everything around the house. And then he came to me with a label, and he stripped off the back, and he stuck it right onto my chest, and he said, "I name you Papa." And the moment struck me because of the deep truth. It was through his relationship to me that I had learned what it meant to be his father. We learn to love in relationship with one another and with the earth. I want to share how a couple of our luminaries put this. Mark Morrison Reed say, "It's a simple truth. In being loved, we learn to love. Those who are loved will in turn love others. Those who feel God's infinite love," whether you think of it as God's infinite love or the universe's infinite love or the possibility of infinite love within themselves, will feel so good about themselves, so connected to life, so full of compassion that they will not be able to help but spread that love. They will overflow with love. What is love? To stand before life with open heart, accepting arms, eyes wide with wonder, and a bemused smile. What is love? To stand before life with an open heart, with accepting arms, with eyes wide with wonder and a bemused smile. He goes on to talk about this image that Universalist preachers, he heard it from Gordon Bucky McKeeman, but it went back and back to Universalist preachers, this image of the last days, the end of times, where we find this victorious love, God dragging, imagine ripping by the collar and pulling into heaven the last unrepentant sinner. That there is a love so powerful and fierce that in the end it cannot be resisted. A poem to close by Stephen Levine. If prayer would do it, I'd pray. If reading esteemed thinkers would do it, I'd be halfway through the patriarchs. If discourse would do it, I'd be sitting with His holiness every moment He was free. If contemplation would do it, I'd have translated the periodic table to hermit poems, converting matter to spirit. If even fighting would do it, I'd already be a black belt. If anything other than love could do it, I've done it already and left the hardest for last. Amen, and blessed be.